Raised in the Bronx, New York, the son of a printer, Alan J. Pakula would become one of the most important filmmakers of the 1960s and 70s. In 1962, as the producer of To Kill A Mockingbird, he earned his first Oscar nomination for Best Picture. In the years to come, Oscar nominations and wins were frequent for his films such as The Sterile Cuckoo, Klute, All the President's Men, Comes a Horseman, and Sophie's Choice. His frequent collaborators included cinematographer Gordon Willis and Nestor Almendros, composers Marvin Hamlisch and Michal, and the New York post-production teams, who he called his family.
Well, he's a product of the, 70s filmmaking, like many of those that came from that time period. He fits right in there with the Lumettes and the, certain stuff that Mike did, Nichols and
Arthur Penn.
He was a quintessential New York storyteller.
Yeah.
In this episode, re-recording mixer Lee Dichter, supervising sound editors Chic Ciccolini and Ron Bochar, ADR supervisor Deborah Wallach, and music editor Todd Kasow talk about working with Alan Pakula on the films Rollover, DREAMLOVER, Sophie's Choice, Orphans, and The Devil's Own. I'm your host, Isabel Sidurni, and this is Frame by Frame, introducing you to the most influential and respected film professionals working in New York today, as a celebration of New York's ongoing contribution to the global film community. Frame by Frame is co-presented by the Motion Picture Editors Guild and Post New York Alliance because it's how you finish that counts. Our website is bit.do/framebyframe, and we can be found on Twitter at @postny. The host for today's episode is Goldcrest. I asked Chic, Lee, Deborah, Ron, and Todd to talk about what defined Alan Pakula as a filmmaker.
I think he had such a passion for the characters. He was character-driven, and from that, what would they do, and how the stories that he chose were of people who had convictions, and drew them into deeper and deeper into certain stories.
He was a quintessential New York storyteller.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
and
the kind of director he was. I mean, he wasn't always New York, but,
no,
when he settled down with us, he was telling stories.
Yeah, telling stories about people, the New York filmmaking genre, is
people,
more
relationships.
about narrative, people, relationships, not the California big action films. He really wasn't into that.
His performance was everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
And he would give an oration of what the scene means. Mm-hmm. It was, I just, to this day, if I can work with a director who can give half of what he used to give, I go, boy, you're almost as good as Alan Pakula.
Alan was a heavy analyzer. He was
totally and he'd give it out. It was like he was almost practicing or preaching it, and he didn't care if he had to do it once or 100 times.
And it could change.
Came from the heart.
And it was always evolving. So it's not just...
You can justify anything.
Once it's all put together.
I think he put some, people off. I know he put some producers off. I know he put some talent off. I mean,
what do you mean?
Come on, he was nicknamed Alan Peculiar by a lot of different people out there.
Really?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
He was saying his parents wanted him to be a doctor.
Yes.
And he wanted music and art. This was the big thing, but they were just... pushing to the last moment.
Well, that's why I think he was so oriented by people and interested in people. What would they do? What did they do in certain situations? It's all psychological choices. Look at the name of the movie, Sophie's Choice.
Well, he's a product of the 70s filmmaking, like many of those that came from that time period. I mean, he's totally a product of it. Yeah, he fits right in there with the Lumettes and the, certain stuff that Mike did, Nichols and
Arthur Penn.
A very proud liberal.
Very proud liberal.
And it wasn't that he was a proud liberal. He had a good distinction of what's right and wrong.
You never got the sense he was in it for the money. He was, enjoying the process. It's strange. I think he's one of the forgotten directors in a way that are from New York. I mean, people know, they might know Parallax View. Everybody knows All the President's Men, but, there's...
They don't know who directed it.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, the director's side of it, and he wasn't a flashy guy on that level.
But he was very smart, and he was an intellect. You know,
Yeah.
had
He
that-
was. He was very
really
smart.
educated, very well
He went to
educated.
Yale, right?
I think that the people in the film industry, they know who he is. I don't, it would be like saying
I'm sorry, I'll
12
disagree
Angry
with
Men
you on
was
that.
Sidney Lumet. There's a lot of people that
Yeah.
don't know who Sidney Lumet is either. It's a family. We're a big family, and we know who these directors are. Every director that I've worked with, each one is unique in their own right.
I asked Chic, Lee, Deborah, Ron, and Todd to talk about how they first got involved with Alan.
He came to me. I was working on probably one of the Jim Glickenhaus movies back in 1981, I believe. And he approached me, and he wanted to know if I would be interested in meeting Alan and working with him on the movie Rollover with Jane Fonda and Chris Christopherson, Hume Cronin. And we were working over at Sound One at the time. And that was actually my first opportunity to work in a major film that was a studio movie. He had a problem with Chris Christopherson because Chris had dentures. And whether he was doing the talking or whether he was listening, you'd hear this clicking. And so one of the things that he said that he really would like me to do is to remove as many of the clicks as I possibly can because it's driving him crazy. And at the time, we were working in film dialogue and 35 stripes. So we literally had to remove sprockets and replace sprockets in order to clean it out. And of course, we did. We did pretty well, as a matter of fact, I have to say. And what I wound up doing is I told the dialogue editors to keep all the sprockets that they... And at the mix, I brought him a bowl. And the bowl was filled with the sprockets.
That's wonderful.
And I said, "Here you go, Alan. Here's your sprocket. Here's your clicks." And he got a kick out of that.
He did. He actually brought it up to us when we were working on See You in the Morning with Jeff Bridges, because Jeff has a nice smack sound with his lips all the time. And we had to get them all out too. And it was like every time he would start to talk, there'd be this, and you'd have to get rid of it. Yeah.
Teeth clicks. Teeth
sucking
teeth. And so at that point, I was actually finishing up on a project. So I had one of my other colleagues, Greg Sheldon, as a sound group, working on temp mixes. And we were actually doing all these things using, instead of a mixing stage, using the cutting room, the chem, and dubbers, and laying stuff back and then cutting them into the work track when we had a scene put together. So that was my first introduction working with Alan. And then we wound up doing Sophie's Choice in '83 as well. But I think Rollover was actually mixed over at Photoman.
It was,
if I'm not mistaken.
It was. And Evan Lotman was his picture editor on Rollover, and I had met Evan earlier. But it was through Evan. I think Evan, the picture editor, has a lot of pull of where you mix a movie and who you mix it with. And he was the one who brought it over, I was pretty sure. And one day, Bill Nicholson, who, used to do all the bookings at Sound One, said, "Listen, we got a call from Alan Pakula's office, and they want to work with you." And, Alan was a very, world-famous director. He'd done all the President's Men. He had done Klute. He had done, Sterile Cuckoo. He had done a whole list of films. And I said, "Hey, when?" And it was the film Orphans. And so that's
86, 87.
80 something, yeah, middle age.
Well, I know how I got started, and that was through Ron. You hired, I think it was Consenting Adults.
That's
the first one that I worked on.
And I got involved with Alan through Evan Lotman as well. My first supervising job was Orphans that I ever did. And, it was presented to me as a low-budget film that Alan had never really worked on a low-budget film before. So, he's going to have some trouble here, and we need to control the costs, so we're going to hire you because you're cheap. because you've never done it before, and we can get you inexpensively. You know,
And he loved you, Ron.
Well,
He loved your sound.
We had a good time, but you know, I'll never forget the first moment I had with him in Reel 1, where the Modine character comes home, gets off a bus, runs into the house looking for his brother. We had all of this sound. I mean, you could hear dust motes floating in the air. I mean, it was all of this. And Alan kind of like heard it and was appreciative and said, "Look, I want to like broom that all out. I want it to be quiet. I don't even want to hear his footsteps. I just want it to happen."
Alan had a method of one scene needed to be quiet, and then the next scene needed to be loud.
Kinda, yeah. He had his rhythms.
He actually explained that
He
to
had
me
his rhythms.
a few times.
You know, between you and Lee, both of you said trust him. You have to learn to trust a director. I mean, they may come up with a completely off-the-wall approach, but go with it and see where it goes. He taught me to trust a director. I mean, it was one of those things. It was just, being the first job I did and wondering again if I failed everywhere. It was this level of trust. You have to give the director some trust. And he was a great guy to trust because he wasn't demanding. He wasn't obstinate. He wasn't a prick. He was a really nice guy.
I can say I work hard on a lot of films, but I think I really worked hard for Alan in ADR. There was always a lot of ADR, but I also had extreme freedom to do things. I mean, it's why a lot of people directors that I work with often trust me in a situation now, because you learn what they are looking for, their sensitivities, what can help improve it, and I felt a lot of freedom with him, so I could try things. Also vocally, and present them, and either they worked or they didn't, but, I didn't just do what I was told. So playing with performance, there's always adding dialogue. Something like Devil's Own was changing constantly. And then there's all the background stuff that happens, and so you're creating atmospheres with, vocally. With principal actors, it's all about performance. It's about when you're editing and there's a scene that was 10 minutes and there was a certain arc, and now the scene is 2 minutes, it changes how it should play. And he was very sensitive to things like that. And
you were part of Pelican, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the group
Oh
in
my
Pelican
God, the group was unbelievable.
amazing. Yeah.
The panic scenes, all those.
Yeah,
it was
huge.
great. Yeah, and I got to play. We started just different miking systems, but it's also we're all collaborators.
Yeah.
We're also a team. So like Ron needs something or asks for. I mean, we
again,
do it as a collaborative effort.
I think from my end, Alan always cared about every project he worked on, and if it wasn't coming up to the expectation that he originally may have set for it for himself, he tried, and he worked very, very hard to pull off what he wanted to get out of it. Every one of the films he did that way. And I've been with other directors where, you're working on something that is not going to be received well, and the directors just kind of tune out after a while. I mean, they really know what they've got, so, just finish it up, okay? See ya, bye. And, you do it. You finish up the film, and, there maybe come around for playbacks, but Alan was involved with the finals that we did, top to bottom. He wouldn't just watch playback. He would stick around a lot.
And the other thing about working with Alan is that if you did your job right, it's not like he accepted incompetence or laziness or any of that kind of thing. But, he did work with good people.
Yeah.
He always expressed gratitude.
Totally.
Always expressed gratitude. And that's often lacking because comes with the respect as well. Yeah. That you could fix something that he was having a problem with, he was grateful. And he respected your work.
Yeah, you'd rant and rave. What a great job you did.
Yeah, which makes you want to work harder. That's what I'm saying. This way of it was a very nice collaboration.
Yeah,
you felt it was a collaboration.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you felt if anything were off kilter, you were like, okay.
Yeah, he'd get you time
get
too.
This back on. Yeah.
He would always get you time.
Oh yes, to do it what you needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To do it right.
And Alan was a gentleman.
I was
Totally.
going to say that. That's my.
I mean, when he said he didn't like something, it wasn't an attack.
No, not at all.
It was a discussion, and it was actually bringing you into his fold to do that.
Chick, when you worked with him, he was always wearing a suit, right?
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
khakis and a blue blazer
Yep, with a tie.
and
Sometimes
and
a tie.
But he
Yeah.
always wore loafers and took them off. He always
Yes.
took his shoes off.
It's because he had
Yeah.
gout.
Stocking feet.
He had
Yeah.
gout.
You knew he was relaxing when his socks came off and he just had the loafers without the socks.
Yes.
Alan was definitely, like you said, a gentleman and very even keel. He did have his emotional upswings and what have you. I mean, I heard him with Evan, him ranting and carrying on about the studio and wanting certain things a certain way. And, he would vent and we got to see that. And I think that's special for us. I think that being part of that film community, it's great to know. I mean, I worked with Ron Howard for a good number of years, and Ron very rarely got upset, but every now and again I'd see him lose it, and all because of these preview screenings that they would have. The studios would insist upon it, and it was through committee that things got made. And there was a time that wasn't the case at all. The director had final say, and that was it. I think that he's one of those well-rounded, but his forte is his dialogue. He's got very good dialogue in his movies. Unfortunately, in terms of the film community, where the accolades go, it's not those type of movies. I mean, I thought for sure that Sophie's Choice stood a good chance in terms of sound because of the design and how it interwove with the dialogue, and it didn't even get a nod.
Oh, he was a New Yorker by then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you mean?
Well,
At
it
that
was the
time,
California.
At that time,
New Yorkers
Yeah.
didn't get nominations.
No,
didn't
definitely
hear.
not. And as a matter of fact, Sophie's Choice was a very heavy dialogue film with lots of narratives, and it was big. It was a big production. And after they finished shooting, Alan decided to do the editing in the Hamptons. So they had the cutting rooms all set up in the Hamptons, and we had our cutting rooms at Sound One, and we commuted to the Hamptons when we had something to show or sit down and have spotting sessions and these voiceovers, which were quite interesting, because watching her transform herself from Meryl Streep to Sophie was pretty remarkable, including putting teeth in her front teeth to kind of give her that lispy sound. What was nice about Sophie's Choice, it wasn't a heavy-duty effects film, but yet we did do certain things that were not your traditional, for instance, ADR. We actually went on location. Much of the movie takes place in Brooklyn in a place called the Pink Palace. And it was a Victorian-style house, and we wound up renting it out. We got a recordist. Andy Aaron was the recordist. I don't know if you guys remember him.
Oh yeah.
And we went to the house and recorded all kinds of things. Brought in the actors, and they all shouted out lines. Alan actually wrote them, so it wasn't just ad libs. And he directed it. He came to the location and recorded the stuff. Then we went to another location, kind of desolate area up in New York State, to record shout outs from the different Nazis and Polish people that were giving direction to the various prisoners as to where to go in regards to the train yard. We recorded all sorts of loop group that spoke German and Polish and other languages, and they did the shout outs. So we had that natural exterior sound as opposed to the studio sounds that are manufactured in an ADR stage. So everything was very live. We even did shout outs in Brooklyn of mothers yelling for their kids out in the street. So we had people like Joanne Laub, Mark's wife, put together a group of ladies, and we had the sound recordists like halfway down the block while these women would shout out all these, Anthony, come home for dinner, your father's going to get you, that kind of thing. And all these things were all sprinkled in, layers and layers of different sounds, and carefully orchestrated to never interfere with the dialogue, which was very important to the movie. You know, one of the things that I remember, Stingo and Sophie are sitting in a window seat overlooking a kind of a desolate street, and outside you see an ice cream truck. Before she goes into this flashback of memory, we had the sound of the old-fashioned ice cream bells. I went to Good Humor, as a matter of fact, and ordered them. I got somewhere in my studio, I have all these props, and that was one of them. And we'd have them ringing and put it through a lot of echo through Lee, and created this kind of memory thing where she hears the sounds and then she goes into her story.
The bells.
The ice cream bells in real time, and then we put them in reverb to set up a flashback. And she's telling him the story about what happened to her during the war, with her secrets, slowly come out through the movie. And Chic used a lot, we used different transitions. That was one of them.
It was, one of those things that took place in that period of time, and ice cream trucks were summertime. It was hot. That just seemed to work. Alan liked the idea. There were kids running around in the street. A lot of the stuff was all stuff that was off camera. So you wanted to make sure that these things were not foreign to people's ears. They immediately could relate to those particular sounds. It was like when they go to the amusement park, all the rides and what have you. It was all real stuff that just kind of embellished the visuals.
Having the freedom to go with the sound. I mean, when Sophie had to make her, her choice, it was the most powerful scene I ever worked on in any movie ever. Alan let us go with that one, with that scene, and Chic and I, we went through many, many different sounds that you had put together, Chic, to help create the terror. I mean, it was terrifying already, but leading up to it, you weren't sure what was going on, because it came near the end of the scene about what she actually had to choose. It was choosing one of her children, to go this way, and the other one to come with her. And the layers of effects that he let us go for is just, we kept going and to make it more terrifying, with the screaming and the yelling of the people and the guards and the dog barking. He kept saying, make the dog louder, go for it, go for it, go as loud as you can. There was German shepherds, and it was terrifying. And I'll never forget when we finally got it. I mean, Chic and I think both of us were crying when the end of the sequence, because she heard the child scream when they pulled her away from her. It was just terrifying.
It was
really
absolutely.
But with that, Alan gave us the go ahead to just don't hold back. This is like, I know this is the most awful thing that you're gonna be working on for a long time, but go for it.
And then we started mixing, and Lee and myself and other folks sat there and just kind of chiseled away.
And the favorite part that I had in every mix with him is the last day of the mix. He'd always sit behind us. And the last day of the mix, he'd take the coat off, take his tie off, roll up his sleeves, and sit down right next to Lee and I, or Richard Portman and I, or Tom Fleischman and I, and for the movies that I did with him, and say, I just want to be down here with you guys for the final. We're like, all right, fine. But it was that moment where, he just felt part of the whole finish. I don't know. Yeah. It was like Dad coming down and sitting with you.
He also had a film, Sophie's Choice, in its original length, it was like 4 hours and 45 minutes.
Oh my God.
And he had to bring it down to 2.5 hours maximum. That was a major undertaking. And of course, they did. William Styron was upset because he felt that there was a lot of important stuff that was removed, taken out of the story.
He was the writer
that
of
was
the book.
important.
Yeah.
We were working on a film called
DreamLover.
DreamLover, right?
DreamLover.
And DreamLover was another film that he loved to play with sound. The story takes place. A girl gets attacked. She kind of relives this attack over and over again. Winds up losing sleep, and each time that dream occurs, he wanted different things to happen. Sometimes he just wanted certain key effects to play out and everything else be silent. And because we had everything all individually set up, it was an easy thing for him to dial in and dial out music, effects, dialogue, whatever. So he definitely was a director that was mild-mannered, but
he grew with it all
sound.
too. He grew with sound. I mean, he went from mono to stereo to 5.1 to he was fine playing with it all. He was he was actually a director that keyed into sound. I mean, he had an appreciation for what we did.
One of the things that he did on Sophie's Choice that I thought was really a nice gesture on his part, the production company was going to only have heads of departments getting their credit, and which would have meant that my whole sound crew would have not. And I sat down and composed a letter. I didn't want to go to him because you never know what frame of mind a person is going to be in, and my timing was never always optimum. So I decided to submit a letter. I first went to Evan about it, and because it turned out the picture department was going to get their credits. So I told him what I was going to do, and he said, well, do it. And so I wound up writing this letter, and a couple of days later, he calls me in, and he told me that he talked with the people, and he said that I want this sound crew to get the credits, including the apprentices and what have you. And so I was very happy about that. He didn't have to do that, but he did.
That happened on Presumed Innocent, too, where we had the same issue, where they were just going to give heads of departments. Actually, not even. They were going to give me a credit, and the rest of the crew wasn't going to get anything. And I basically walked into Alan and say, can you get my name off it, too? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, it's the whole crew. I don't want to be just the only one. And, he made sure at that point in time that everybody then got a credit, because he didn't even know that they were doing it. He, was really, it wasn't just us. It was going to be PAs. It was going to be, the Teamsters. Part of them were going to get cut out.
I was told at the time, because before I sent my letter to Alan, is that one of the post supervisors said that when you think about the amount of footage that's added to the film credits, that on a cost factor,
shipping,
it's astronomical. But it does. It boils down to dollars and cents. That's how they perceive things, which
it boils down to respect, and that's where Alan took the high road, and
exactly, that's true.
I had this experience with him on The Devil's Own.
Oh boy.
Where it was a film that was being rewritten daily, both in script and in editing. And then down the block at my room, musically. Yeah. And he would come in and spend a whole day, I think just so he wouldn't have to be in the cutting room.
Yeah.
We'd cut music together and we'd do things. And I just remember this one time, he said, make Brad Pitt, I forget the guy's name, make Brad Pitt like we love him. It's like
Francis,
he's a sweetheart. It's like, and when it turns, it'll be terrifying and all this and that, blah, blah, blah. And we did this, I did this incredible temp score on it, and he's getting ideas from it and going back and telling the picture editors. It was really helping lead the film in his final structure. And then he comes in the next day and he goes, okay, let's make him a killer. Put killer music on it. We just threw the music out and made it killer music. But that's how he thought, It was really interesting. He really viewed the film as a whole, to the point where one time in my room, he got going without a script, without any paperwork, and just got going into what is the first scene, and he said, then the next scene is this, and the next thing is that, and he went through the whole film in his head, and it was like a challenge to him, It was really kind of neat. I think that was consenting adults, a lot of consenting adult stuff. And that was a strange picture because it really was designed one way, and he was unsure about it. And then Sam Osteen kind of just cut the peanuts out of it, and I think took a lot of the guts out of it.
Well, that one became a little bit of the beginning of an undoing in my way of thinking about Alan, because market research took over. That was a film that he had little control of near the very end. And we remember, we previewed in Jersey 3 different versions of it.
I remember,
one night.
20 minutes apart.
They were all 20
For the
minutes
love
apart.
scene.
for the studio execs to get up out of the end of one studio of one theater and walk over and watch the audience reaction in the next theater, and get up and walk over and watch it.
A
in the
movie
next.
by the
And,
numbers.
You know, it became a process that, you know, I think started to undo the confidence that Alan had, and
maybe.
you know, it took down many directors from the '70s that never had to put up with that before, and I think that process,
definitely.
that process was, you know, I mean, for me, it started on Consenting Adults. That was the first one that we did that had that kind of intensity to it, and it caught him by surprise.
Yeah. Right.
And it ended up being a vote by number. Which one tested better was the one we ended up going with.
And it was not nearly as good as
No.
Right.
And it wasn't as good as the original cut we all saw. But
Which had all these beautiful long pans, and it's like, we know what we're going to see, but we're going to take our time
And it was
seeing
beautiful
it.
to
And when we
watch.
do, it's
And,
going to
you
be
know,
even more juicy.
there were beautiful storm
And they just
scenes
cut
in it,
they just
you know,
went to
it
the
became
minimum.
all about action and the momentary
Action.
scenes.
Which is, when you think about it, because marketing is from LA and they're not they're not,
Action.
narrative.
Yeah, I mean, there are times we're able to work. You know, he wanted me to work heavily with Michael Small on Consenting Adults because there were these loud storm scenes, and he wanted the effects to carry. He wanted them to be part of it, but he also wanted it to be scored. So, you know, he had Michael and I have a meeting and figure out, okay, who's going to take care of this frequency, who's going to take care of that frequency. So we thought about it because of the way Alan put it together for both Michael and I to collaborate, so to speak, on what to do.
So there'd be room in the soundtrack for both.
For both.
At different times, working the music and the effects against each other, so it wouldn't compete.
Alan had final cut on Devil's Zone. I'll never forget that.
Did he?
Yes, I remember
Yeah.
from the producer saying.
Exactly.
I remember that
Producers
story.
were the angriest
Yeah.
people during the final mix.
But they also started shooting without a script.
They started. Devil's Zone is a.
There was so much money made on the director and the top 2 characters.
It's just.
I think it was $60 million right there.
Yeah, that was
Before this.
Devil's Zone was a problem on a lot of levels, and Alan burdened himself with it. I mean, he did everything he could to make the movie he wanted to make under a circumstance that, you know, I mean, every angle, someone threw something up to make it more difficult for him. You know, he really journeyed it through that in a big way.
And in a lot of ways, by the time it gets to us, near the end of when it's getting through us, a lot of these disruptive powers have gone off. And he kind of relied on us to say, okay, family, let's finish this film together. Let's justify it.
In the case of Devil's Zone, they didn't go away,
They
though.
didn't go away.
They were there the whole time, all the way through the final.
Well,
It was
there.
a tough one.
Yeah.
Well, they came in at the end.
It was a
also.
tough one. It was a tough one.
Well, I know with the music on Devil's Zone, the first 20 minutes of the film is this Northern Ireland terrorist scene, basically. And we had incredible music on the temp and all this, and James Horner kept writing, and just it wasn't what Alan wanted. And Alan came in one day, and he just went like, "It's going to be silent, no music."
Yeah.
And I knew he was disappointed, but he's enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Because it was a way to do it, you know, and
we were ready.
all, you know, we all
We
went,
were
yes,
all ready
we're-
with
we're-
whatever we needed to put in.
whatever you need,
Yeah.
you know, we're happy to do it. So
Boy,
we took
that
out
was-
20 minutes of music.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
That was a very tough one.
And then, in his style that he always does, the first piece of music is wonderful, happy family music, you know.
Well, after the terror attack, and the
Yeah.
film
Yeah.
opens with that.
Right.
that
And he'd do that a lot of
Huge.
times. He'd just have this wonderful, you know, it's like How Green Is My Valley type of wonderful music just before, the shit hits.
Well,
the fan.
when they that was an example though. When they, by the time we got to Devil's Own, Alan would like try to get me scripts before they would start shooting, with the idea that I could maybe beg for some sound effects to get recorded. And Devil's Own, they sent me the script on, and I read it one evening and actually called him and said, "Wait a minute." And he goes, No, it's not going to be that script. Because literally every fifth page, Brad Pitt was blowing something up. That character was like going into a crack den and blowing up the building, going into a public school and beating up the principal. I mean, it was just one thing after another that had nothing to do with an Alan Pakula film. I mean, Alan was very sensitive about violence in films. He was really keyed in. I remember going out to lunch while we were working on, it might have been Devil's Own. When did Patriot Games come out? It was around that time period, but it was with Harrison Ford.
Right.
And the poster for Patriot Games was Harrison Ford pointing a gun right at you, with Patriot Games underneath it. And Alan saw it on the side of a bus and froze and said, "Oh, no, Harrison probably doesn't even know they're doing that." And, he went back to the office and made a call to Harrison and complained and said, this is not what you want to show kids. This is not how you want your legacy to be as someone who's promoting, holding firearms like this and promoting pointing at someone. He was very, very keyed into that.
I would always get the sense that deep down inside of him were these things that he would then be able to write about or tap into the emotion of whatever he may have been writing. I think a lot of the stuff in his films are his personal experiences or personal emotions.
Certainly personal views, yeah. I mean, he really wrote
like
a lot
See You
of
in
that
the
in.
Morning, I mean, that's
That's his life,
autobiographical.
yeah, in a lot of ways.
And I just see that a lot. And his character development is such, it's sort of like, maybe what hurt him at some point in his life, or what he loved at once in life, or what he lost. Or I always got that impression that he was totally honest in that. He wasn't making it up. It was really coming from his heart, his soul.
Yeah, he was a human first.
Yeah.
He was a true human.
The sound engineer for today's session was Christopher Chivans. In New York, I'm Isabel Siderni, and this is Frame by Frame.